All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Red Hill Rediscovered, Patrick Henry's Liberty or Death speech 250 years later. My name is Cody Youngblood, and I'm the Director of Historic Preservation and Collections here at Patrick Henry's Red Hill. And I'm very happy to welcome Stephen Wilson, Executive Director of the St. John's Church Foundation, here with us today. Now, Stephen's a pretty amazing person. He operates St. John's Church Foundation, again, a 501c3 nonprofit organization established in 1938, whose mission it is to spark a global appreciation for understanding the role that Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech had in setting America on its path to liberty for all, and to ignite the public's interest in preserving the historic site where it happened. Stephen has been at St. John's Church Foundation since 2019. He's served for 2 years as the organization's first Director of Development and was named Executive Director in 2021. His nonprofit board experience includes Peter Paul RVA, the Richard Bland College Foundation, the Petersburg Area Art League, and Crater Community Hospice. He also serves on the board of managers for the Richmond Chapter, Sons of the American Revolution. He's also earned degrees from the University of Mary Washington, go Eagles, and Richard Bland College of William and Mary, and he holds a certificate in sustainable urban agriculture from Virginia State University. In his spare time, Stephen enjoys hiking and maintaining an urban fig orchard, which I think is pretty cool. And he currently lives in Westover Hills in the city of Richmond. So without further ado, Stephen, take it away. Thank you again for joining us.
Well, thank you, Cody. It's always good to see you and always good to be working with our friends at Red Hill. As Cody mentioned, my name is Stephen Wilson. I serve as Executive Director here at the St. John's Church Foundation. As Cody mentioned, like Red Hill, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we have been around since 1938. Now, Cody mentioned this as well. Our mission is really focused in two key areas, one of which is historic preservation. We raise funds so that we can preserve, this very old and very special place where Patrick Henry delivered his iconic Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech almost 250 years ago. The other part of our mission is to educate the public about the importance of that speech. And we do that through our educational programs. What I'd like to do for this presentation is take you through a PowerPoint, which is going to go over the history of our historic site. And then we'll take everybody back, if you'll humor me, to the 4th grade. And we're going to talk about no taxation without representation. But then we're going to focus on the big day in history, March 23rd, 1775. That was the day that Patrick Henry, seated almost directly behind me, delivered his immortal speech. So we will talk about who was at St. John's Church, how many people were here. Were they revolutionaries? Were they loyalists? And because I'm here, I've got to enact the speech, or at least some of it. So I have brought my trusty friend, my 1700s wig with me, and at some point I will put that wig on. And following the enactment, we'll talk about some of the work we take on at the foundation. We'll close by discussing plans to commemorate the 250th anniversary in 19 days. But before we get started, I just want to, you can't see what I'm seeing, but I'm actually inside the church right now, and I am standing just literally mere feet from where we believe Patrick Henry delivered his immortal words in this general area off of, I think it's out of the sight line, but off of this east-facing window. So with that, why don't we get going on the presentation? What you're going to see on this first slide on the left is going to be a photo of St. John's as if you were entering the property. We are located in Churchill, which is Richmond's oldest neighborhood. Churchill is named after St. John's Church, and we are located on Broad Street between 24th and 25th Streets. You walk up some steps, and this is what you're going to see. Now, this is a pretty big church today. It seats 325 people, but this is not the way it looked when it opened its doors in the 1700s, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Over on the right, you're going to see a couple of photos of some of our actors. Among other things, we produce live theater Liberty or Death reenactments, and I wish you could see what I'm saying, but imagine a church with 9 professional actors in costumes like the ones that you were looking at, seated all around the church, and they will enact the arguments and debates that happen on March 23rd. And of course, this will culminate with Patrick Henry's immortal speech. This is a drone shot taken just a few years ago. So this would be what the church looks like today. And I hope that you all can see my cursor. If you can, you will see that my cursor right now is positioned over the bell tower. which is not original to the church. It was actually installed in the late 1820s. Behind that bell tower is going to be a large section of seating, which is essentially kind of right where I'm standing, back, well, to my right, kind of facing towards Broad Street. But this large section of seating was an addition that was installed in 1772, just 3 years before Patrick Henry delivers his speech. And behind it, this section here, or everything kind of over this way, is going to be the original church, which opened its doors in 1741. And although you really can't see it, if you see my cursor there, you can sort of see where the front door of the church was. And then back behind this original structure will be an addition back here that was installed in 1905 to accommodate an organ that was donated to the church. So, this church has, really seen a lot of additions since it opened in 1741. Now, not only is St. John's the oldest church in Richmond, but it's also the oldest public cemetery in Richmond. And some of our more famous, we like to call them permanent residents, include George Wythe, signer of the Declaration of Independence. And this is his grave marker here on the left. And over on the right, you will see Eliza Poe, a famous actress, but also the birth mother of Edgar Allan Poe. This here, if you follow my cursor, is the oldest gravestone in the city of Richmond. It dates to 1751. And notice this gravestone here, just to the right of this historical interpreter. This is the gravestone of a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Edward Carrington. He very famously, according to legend, stood in this very spot and listened to Patrick Henry deliver his speech through this open window right here. He was so moved by what he heard, he declared to those who were standing around him that he wanted to be buried in the very spot where he stood. And there is his gravestone. Some interesting facts about the churchyard. There are approximately 3,500 people buried in the churchyard, but notice below that there are only about 400 gravestones that exist today. Now, there was some vandalism over the years, but the vast majority of people buried in the churchyard were buried with a stick in the ground, with no gravestone. So there are an awful lot of people buried at St. John's, but there are not really all that many gravestones relative to the number of people buried here. 85 soldiers who fought in the War of 1812 are buried here, and about 20 American patriots who fought in the American Revolutionary War are also buried here, including Edward Carrington. Some additional information about the public cemetery. It opened its doors but it opened in roughly 1800, and it was in its heyday between 1800 and 1820. The cemetery was full around 1820, and Shockoe Hill Cemetery opened shortly thereafter. This is an artist drawing of what the church would have looked like in 1741. As was customary in colonial times, the front door was facing west. Notice, if you can see, it's hard to see here, but you'll see this small bell tower, or excuse me, small bell over top of that door, and you can actually go visit that bell today at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture here in Richmond. But if you can read the fine print, notice that the population of the city of Richmond in 1741 was just 200 people. So Richmond, which was established in 1737, was literally a tiny frontier town, and St. John's Church, which was still part of the Church of England, it was called the Henrico Parish, was built to accommodate this tiny population in Richmond. Now, as the population of Richmond grew, the church needed to expand. And this is not a particularly good photo, but if you can follow my cursor, you will see that addition. And that is going to be, I'm going to go back. That's going to be this section here. That section was installed in 1772. 3 years before Patrick Henry delivers his speech, which is really important because this building in 1772 becomes the largest building in the colony of Virginia west of Williamsburg. It becomes an ideal meeting location for the Second Virginia Convention because of its size. And in 1772, Richmond's population was about 600, so the population had tripled in a 3-decade period. Here are some interior images of the church. I'm going to point to that to the sounding board. It is just ahead of me, but this is a very fine specimen. that cost our foundation about $100,000 to completely repair a number of years ago. But it's wonderful, and it is original to the church. This photo on the right is of a postcard that dates to the 1940s, and it's pretty much what the church looks like today. Some additional images of the inside of the church. This is actually what you will see right behind me. It's actually the same stained glass window. And that is, for anybody who is familiar with the Virginia 250 Commission, it's hard to see him because he's got his back turned, but that is Delegate Terry Austin, who is the chair of the Virginia 250 Commission. Of course, many of you have seen this image, a very famous photo of Patrick Henry delivering the speech. This photo is housed at the Library of Congress. All right, well, I'm going to take everybody back to the 4th grade. If you will all humor me, I will be very fast. I just want to go through a timeline of events that bring us to this important date in history. And I'm going to start with the Tea Act, or the tea tax, which was passed by Parliament in May of 1773. Notice that it was only a few months later, in December of 1773, when the Sons of Liberty dumped 342 chests of tea in the Boston Harbor in the event that we all know as the Boston Tea Party. And then if we fast forward just a few months, in March of 1774, almost 1 year, not to the day, but pretty close from when we get here during the Second Virginia Convention, Parliament is going to pass the first of the coercive acts. We call them the intolerable acts in the colonies. The coercive acts are meant to punish Massachusetts for its involvement in the Boston Tea Party. The coercive acts include the Quartering Act and include the closing of the Port of Boston. Now, if we segue to Virginia, the elected officials here in Virginia, the members of the House of Burgesses, they are monitoring the situation up in Boston. They are concerned about what is happening in Boston, and they are concerned especially that the same thing could happen here. You know, what if the Chesapeake Bay got closed? And so in the summer of 1774, the members of the House of Burgesses decide to have a day of support for Massachusetts. They fast, they pray, and the royal governor of Virginia decides that he is going to retaliate against the House of Burgesses by dissolving that body. And that's big, big stuff. Well, the members of the House of Burgesses decide that they are going to continue to meet without the governor's presence in a series of meetings referred to as the Virginia Conventions or the Virginia Revolutionary Conventions. There are going to be 5 of these meetings. The first one is going to be in the summer of 1774 at the Raleigh Tavern in Williamsburg. And if we move forward, the second Virginia Convention will be here. We are now on the eve of war. This is a full-week convention that goes from March the 20th through to the 27th, but the big day in history is, of course, March the 23rd. That's going to be the day that Patrick Henry is going to propose a resolution for Virginia to establish a militia. But why is this place chosen? Why is St. John's Church chosen as the site of the Second Virginia Convention? Well, it's the largest building in Virginia west of Williamsburg. So this church can accommodate the 120 delegates who came to the Second Virginia Convention. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is that the Patriot Parson, a gentleman by the name of Miles Selden, the rector of the Henrico Parish, is sympathetic to the delegates' cause, and he allows them to meet here. And then there's distance. The 50 miles of distance between Williamsburg and Richmond does provide a level of protection in case the redcoats are sent in. This ultimately does not happen. But these are the reasons why St. John's Church is chosen. Now, who was here? Follow my hand. George Washington, we know, is seated on the other side of the church, closer to that west-facing door. George Washington is going to be one of 2 delegates representing Fairfax County. He is going to be in support of Patrick Henry's resolution to establish a militia, as is Thomas Jefferson. Many are going to be against Patrick Henry's resolution to arm, including Edmund Pendleton, seated up front, representing Caroline County. Peyton Randolph is going to be, as he was in the First Virginia Convention, he will be the president of the Second Virginia Convention. Robert Carter Nicholas is the treasurer of the colony of Virginia. He is representing James City County, and he will be against Patrick Henry's resolution to arm. Richard Henry Lee is going to second the proposal, so he is an emphatic yes, as is Thomas Nelson. Richard Bland is an aye, and if you can see in the fine print, I always put this in here, John Tabb, I bet nobody knows him. He is one of 2 delegates representing Amelia County, just west of Richmond, and he is my 6th great-grandfather, so I put him in there too. Here is, you probably can't see this because the print is small, but this is a list of the 120 delegates who came far and wide to this convention. Almost every single county sent 2 delegates to the convention. There were a few who sent 1, but almost every county sent 2 delegates. All right, well, this is the part where we get dramatic. I'm going to bring out my little friend, the 1700s wig. I hope that it's on straight, but imagine being here, being a delegate to this convention, and you have heard George Washington stand up and say that Henry's right. We do need to arm. And others like Edmund Pendleton will stand up and say, you know, this is too radical. You know, the measure pushes too far. Henry, you were speaking treason. And then Patrick Henry's going to stand up. He's going to call to the president of the convention, Peyton Randolph. Peyton Randolph will give him the floor, and Patrick Henry will say, and I'm only going to do the first couple of paragraphs, then we'll skip to the end. No man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism as well as the abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed this house. But different men oftentimes see the same subject in different lights. So I shall hope that it not be thought of as disrespectful to those gentlemen if, entertaining as I do, opinions of a character very opposite to theirs, I shall set forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before this house is one of awful moment to our country. For my own part, I should consider it as nothing less than a question of freedom, slavery. And in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way in which we can hope to arrive at the truth and to fulfill our great responsibility to God and to our country. All right, that's the beginning. Very calm. Patrick Henry is showing deference to those in attendance who are older than he is. Patrick Henry is only 38 years old at the time of the speech, and there are far more senior delegates here. But as the speech goes toward its dramatic conclusion, Patrick Henry will, as he was known to do, remove his glasses, and he gets a little more fired up. It is in vain to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north shall bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that the gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, were peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. All right. This is the part where I remove the wig. So very dramatic. There are 120 delegates here, many of whom had made up their mind before they ever entered the convention that they would be an aye vote if a resolution was proposed. And many are going to be against. But there are some here who are undecided. And Patrick Henry, through his iconic speech, was able to convince just enough delegates for the vote to pass. And it only passed by 4 or 5 votes. Give me liberty or give me death becomes a rallying cry among the colonies. And yes, by the time those first shots were fired just 27 days later in Lexington and Concord up in Massachusetts, they knew. Word had traveled to Massachusetts and they knew that this resolution had passed. This guarantees that if an armed conflict breaks out, this will not be a regional conflict restricted to New England. Virginia is going to be on the side of revolution. As we all know, Virginia is the largest colony in area, the largest colony in population and in wealth. Here are some images of Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death, including those taken in 1989 at Tiananmen Square in China. Some additional images of Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death. I'm going to move through these pretty quickly. The mission of the St. John's Church Foundation, as you heard, is education as well as historic preservation. We are really excited as a significant tourist attraction in the Commonwealth of Virginia with between 35 and 40,000 visitors annually. We are on the cover of the 2025 Virginia Travel Guide, or Virginia's for Lovers. So we're really excited about that. Some images of our actors and reenactments, some additional images. We were on C-SPAN a couple of years ago. We always choose somebody from the audience to play the Reverend, Reverend Miles Selden. So if you come to a reenactment, perhaps you can actually join the cast. We have a free reenactment program for Title I schools, specifically fourth grade students in the city of Richmond. That program serves about 3,500 students each year. We have a speaker series. These are our speakers for this year. We've only announced Ken Ruscio, the past president of Washington and Lee University, but I will tell you that Craig Shirley, a New York Times bestselling author, will be our May speaker. Rosemary Zagari, who is a professor of history at George Mason University, will be our first fall speaker. And Woody Holton, you may know him, son of former Virginia Governor Linwood Holton and a professor of history at University of South Carolina, will be our second fall speaker. We've had many naturalization ceremonies here at St. John's. Historic preservation, of course, is our number one goal. We partner with many organizations, including our friends at the Daughters of the American Revolution, who will perform gravestone cleaning. And there's a before and after photo. Our big historic preservation campaign right now, we call it the 250 campaign. It's a $500,000 campaign to repair about 70 gravestones in our churchyard and 11 of these stained glass windows. We have raised $450,000, so we are about 90% funded. All right, I'm going to close by talking about plans to commemorate the speech in 19 days' time. This is what we're going to be looking at on the big day. On Sunday, March the 23rd, we will host 3 of our live theater Liberty or Death reenactments. They're going to be at 1:30 p.m., 3:30, and at 5:30. Now, I'll give you the bad news first. All 3 of those reenactments, and this is bad news if you don't have tickets, all 3 are sold out. Again, this church seats about 325 people, so this will be buzzing with action on Sunday, March 23rd. There will be a musical performance which will precede each reenactment. Here's the good news. The 1:30 p.m. reenactment can be watched by anybody in the world at va250.org. And we expect many, many thousands of people to watch this around the world. This is courtesy of our friends at the Virginia 250 Commission. The 1:30 p.m. reenactment is going to be introduced by a celebrity. Stay tuned, next slide for that. Portraying the Reverend Miles Selden at the 1:30 p.m. reenactment will be historian and past University of Richmond president, Dr. Ed Ayers. And I'm sure some of you watching will know John Kukla, who wrote a biography of Patrick Henry. He will be our 3:30 p.m. Miles Selden. And then pop-up Liberty or Death speeches will be performed throughout the Richmond metro area on Friday, March the 21st. And I got to give a shout out to Red Hill. Patrick Henry Jolly, who I think many of you know, will actually be performing those speeches in partnership with St. John's. And he will be performing the speech at the Executive Mansion Friday afternoon. We're really excited about that. And he is, this will be open to the public. So if you're in the Richmond area and you would like to see Patrick Henry Jolly perform the speech, come to the Executive Mansion. All right, who is our big celebrity? There he is. Ken Burns will kick us off with remarks. Some of you may know that he has a new series coming out later this year called The American Revolution. It will debut on PBS. It is 6 episodes and 12 hours. And we are very, very excited that Mr. Burns will be here to kick us off on the 250th anniversary. And I think I've got one slide left. How can you support? Well, live stream the reenactment. Go to va250.org. You go right to their main homepage. This will be at 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, March the 23rd, and you can watch us remake history. You can go to our website, as you can see, historicstjohnschurch.org. Go to the very bottom of the page, click a button, and start receiving our e-news. And as any nonprofit will say, if you like what you hear, if you want to support the work, go to Red Hill's website, make a gift. Maybe come to our website and make a gift too. But that is all I have for you. Hopefully there's a question or two in the chat.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. That was a wonderful presentation. And I got to say, the wig looked great on you.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if it was on straight, so thank you.
No, it absolutely was. And actually, I wanted to start us off here with a question about the speech itself and the context in which it was given. So we know kind of what the lead up was to the speech, but what was the reaction afterwards, both in the church and across the colony of Virginia?
So we know that there was a hushed silence that came over the audience. It's funny, when we do the reenactment here, and you hear "Give me liberty" or "Give me death," and there'll be applause from the crowd, and sometimes I even get applause when I do the speech. But that's not the way it was on March 23rd, 1775. There was a hushed silence that came over the crowd, and then Peyton Randolph was going to call for a vote. And as we know, it was a voice vote. But the vote passed very narrowly. And, as we know, liberty or death then becomes a rallying cry, not only in Virginia, but across the colonies.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And we do have some questions from the audience as well. This one over from YouTube. Someone asked, were the stained glass windows original to the church or present at the time of Patrick Henry's speech?
So that is an excellent question. I'm going to actually add a second part to the question. So the short answer is no, they are not original. These first two pews they kind of stop just up ahead, or part of the original structure of the church. I'm actually standing in that 1772 addition that was put onto the church. So because they are in that 1772 edition, they are actually not original, but they are old. This one behind me dates to 1886. All of the windows will date anywhere from 1880 to 1920. But my question was going to be, are they Tiffany windows, which is a question we get a lot. And I would say, no, they are not Tiffany, but they are of the Tiffany style. And hopefully that answers the viewer's question.
All right, very interesting.
A good question.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize just how simple churches used to be in the 18th century. You're coming off of the Protestant belief of the simplicity of the church, no stained glass windows, and I think the pastors want people to listen to the word rather than the decoration around them.
Yeah, and if someone was interested in viewing Tiffany windows, if you're in the Richmond area, there's Blandford Church just south of us in Petersburg, which I believe dates to 1736. I know it's a few years older than St. John's, but they've got quite a few Tiffany windows. So, and it's open to the public.
Wow, that's great. Another question here. This one from Sydney. She asked, how many times a month do you hold events in the church?
That's a good question. So we host live theater reenactments for the public every Sunday from Memorial Day to Labor Day. If you go to our website, you'll see a list of all of the programs that we offer. We have 4 speaker programs a year. We have other reenactments at various times of the year, but not as frequently as in the summer. We host about 100 reenactments every year, but many of those are going to be either for school groups or for private organizations that want to book. So that's probably clear as mud, but we offer a lot of programs.
All right, great. This one's from Hope. Were women allowed in the church for the speech?
To the best of my knowledge, they were not.
Yeah, that's what I've heard as well. I think there's some possible claims some were listening from outside the church, but yeah, not inside.
That's right. And I hope, I don't know if Hope is still in Florida or not, but hi, Hope, wherever you are.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Hope Marston is our CEO here at Red Hill.
Right. And I will add one of my favorite executive directors.
Oh. All right, here's another good question we got. Can you comment about Patrick Henry's course during the war? Was he hunted by the British for insurrection?
So what we know is that Patrick Henry goes on to become the first governor of a free and independent Virginia. He held several terms in office. Was he hunted by the British? I'm going to defer to a John Kukla for that one, but I would imagine that good things would not have happened to him had he been caught by the British.
Yeah. To my knowledge, he wasn't specifically hunted. Obviously, there was the order against him placed by Lord Dunmore after the gunpowder incident. But we do know that Henry, on a personal level, was a little bit nervous about how close the British were getting. So he actually moved homes way back into Henry County, a place called Leatherwood,
Right.
just to try to escape from any possible interference with the British. So,
Yeah.
all right, good question there. And we got another one from Lucia here. How do we know the number of graves in the St. John's graveyard if not all of them have gravestones?
So that is a good question. We know through a number of different ways, through church records, which are very good, not perfect, but they're very good. Through city records, which are good enough. But also a number of years ago, we had ground penetrating radar, or GPR, and we actually covered a good portion of the cemetery. And so kind of by using the church records, the city records, and then ground penetrating radar, we've got a pretty good guesstimate that there are somewhere in the general neighborhood of about 3,500 people buried in the churchyard. That's a great question, because there are, relative to the number of people buried here, there are very few graves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll point out to the fact that on one of those early slides, you saw the grave marker of Eliza Poe, and you also saw the grave marker for George Wythe. Those are grave markers and not gravestones. So they are not original gravestones. They were both installed, I think they were both installed in 1922. So please know that, even they were not buried with gravestones.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. All right, another good question here. This one's from Philip. Is St. John's an active church congregation today?
I was waiting on that question. I purposely did not answer that because I knew somebody was going to ask it. So it is. It is an active and diverse Episcopal parish. People have been worshiping in this very space since 1741. I will say that we're two separate organizations. There is St. John's Episcopal Church, and then I work, of course, for the foundation. We're in the history business, but we both occupy the space. Great question.
And we've got another one from Sydney here. You might have mentioned it, but why did Patrick Henry pick St. John's to share his speech?
So I would say that it wasn't Patrick Henry who picked St. John's, but it was the convention that picked St. John's as an ideal meeting location because of its size. This church being big enough to hold 120 delegates who came for the convention, and also the fact that the rector of the church allowed the delegates to meet here. Good question. They've all been great questions.
You're getting a lot today. This is great.
Yeah, and I haven't been stumped yet. I'm feeling like my luck's about to run out.
Well, this is an easy one. Julie just asked the website again for March 23rd. I'll throw that up on the screen here.
Thank you. Yeah, good question. And just for clarity, it is the VA 250 website that will stream the reenactment. So don't go to our website. Go to our website, but don't go to it at 1:30 p.m. On March 23rd. Go to va250.org. You won't have to click any link. It'll be splattered right on the main homepage. It'll be a huge box. You won't be able to miss it. And you will be able to either start viewing from the beginning. If you come in a little bit late, you can view it from the beginning, or you can pick it up live.
All righty. And here's one from Tony. Our understanding is that the speech was not written and was assembled about 40 years post the speech. Can you provide details of how the speech was recreated? Were there any materials from Henry's personal journals or writings?
No, that's a really good question. Cody, maybe you can help me with this. I'll start and I'll ask you to chime in.
Sure.
So the short answer is you're absolutely right, Tony. The speech was not written down. Cody, you were at the talk a few days ago that John Kukla gave, and he mentioned during his talk at Scotchtown the other night that he imagined Patrick Henry actually kind of walking the grounds at Scotchtown, practicing his speech. Whether that happened or not, who knows? But what we do know is that the speech was not written down, so there is no written account of the speech. William Ward, I think, is the gentleman that you're referring to. He was Patrick Henry's original biographer, and he cobbled together the speech. And Cody, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, so you're correct. About 40 years after the speech was given, start about 1805 or so, William Mort starts interviewing eyewitnesses to the speech. Most notably, people like St. George Tucker, John Tyler Sr., the father of the future president, and they gave him their best accounts of what was there. St. George Tucker gave, I think it was about 2 paragraphs, and William Mort kind of just used the general ideas of what Henry would have spoken to at that time to cobble it all together. But we do know for sure that "Give me liberty or give me death," the end and arguably the most important part of the speech, is fairly accurate. So
Right.
even though they may not be the exact words, we've got the right idea thanks to William Wirt.
That's right. Yeah, good question.
All right, got another one from Hope here. Are there any graves under the addition to the church?
There are. There are not many, but if you think of the original church, 1741, and then this is an addition, and there's another addition in 1905. They actually put these additions over top of existing graves. So if I was to take for instance, you, Cody, underneath the church, I could show you a handful of gravestones that are actually underneath the church. So the short answer to that, Hope, is yes, there are.
Very cool. All right. Another good one here. Does St. John's Church Foundation receive any government funding to support its mission?
I know, Kafu. Good question, Kafu. Thank you for teeing that one up for me. We receive no government support for our operations. I think people sometimes make the assumption that we are government funded, and we are not. So I think very similar to Red Hill, we rely on the generosity of the public to preserve this site and also for our educational purposes. A great question.
All right. Another one from Tony here. You're just getting them, all kinds of ones coming in here. How were Jefferson and Washington influenced by Patrick Henry? Were there any writings that referenced Henry, in Washington's or Jefferson's writings?
I got stumped. Yeah, that's a stumper for me. Cody, you know the answer to that one. I'm going to pass on that one. I don't want to get myself in hot water by playing guessing games.
No, you're good. I can give a bit of a broad answer here. Washington and Henry were really good friends throughout their lives. And I think if you were to ask Washington, who was the most important Virginian of his time, and he would certainly bring Patrick Henry up on that pedestal along with himself. We know that it was Washington who coaxed Henry to come back into the fold of the federal government at the end of his life here at Red Hill. But Henry instead decided to run for the House of Delegates. And in March 1799, he gave his final public speech, and he would ultimately win his seat, but he would die before he took office. And there's a great letter that Washington wrote to Henry, which was kind of the big persuasive outlet to make him come back into the fold. Washington was really worried about an impending civil war. We have factions coming in between the Jefferson Republicans and people not wanting to support this new government. And it was Washington who relied on Henry to try to bring the country together under this new constitution. Jefferson, on the other hand, Henry and Jefferson were very good friends when they met in the 1750s, but they had a bit of a falling out starting about 1781 due to some issues there while Jefferson was governor. But ultimately, it proved to be kind of the downfall of their friendship, and it's not known if they ever spoke again to each other after that incident. But certainly they mentioned Henry in tons of writings of their period, since Henry was involved in every aspect of the founding period. So.
And I was going to jump in with something. I forgot to mention this earlier. I'm sure most of the viewers out there know Patrick Henry Jolly, but if anybody out there does not, he is fifth great grandson of Patrick Henry himself, and he will actually be performing here in the church too. It's 6:30 p.m. on the anniversary day, and this is a free event. So again, for anybody in the Richmond area, if you want to see Patrick Henry Jolly perform, and he's good, real good, come to St. John's Church at 6:30 p.m.
All right, and another question here. This one might be a tough one. What were the conclusions of the Virginia Conventions number 3 through 5?
So I will tell you who I will defer to. So I don't know the answer to that, first of all, but I would defer to Brent Tarter, Tarter, who is the definitive or preeminent expert on the 5 Virginia Conventions. So it looks like the name BBWNG 54. I'll have to get back to you on that one, but I'd be happy to reach out to Brent Tarter and ask him that question.
All right. And speaking of Patrick Jolly, he asks, why the phrase liberty or death?
I got asked this the other day, and I went out on a limb and said, that he was inspired of and came up with a dramatic ending. I don't think that really answers the question, but perhaps Patrick himself knows. Yeah,
there's a couple, and I'll speak for Patrick here since we're good friends and coworkers. The phrase "give me liberty or give me death" was certainly a popular phrase at this time because of a play, in fact, that was going around the country. And this was a play it's called Cato, a Tragedy, 1713 by Joseph Addison. And it was based on the life of a Roman general by the name of Cato the Elder. And he was a real person. He was unfortunately under the tyrannical rule of Julius Caesar, the dictator at the time. And after several pretty damaging military losses, Cato decided to take his personal integrity very seriously, and rather than live under the dictatorship of Caesar, Cato decided to kill himself. He stabbed himself with his sword. And all that to say, Addison decided to dramatize his life. And at the part of Cato's death, he says, "It is now not a time to talk of aught but chains or conquest, liberty or death." And Henry is kind of copying that in his own speech, where he takes his famous whalebone paper cutter and plunges it against his chest, acting as if he's Cato himself. So a really cool connection to some classical history there.
That's a great answer. And Cody, what you did not mention was that you will be bringing that very paper cutter from 1775 to us on the anniversary day. And I believe it has not been in these walls, in 250 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're very excited for that. So if people are able to come to the wonderful events on the 23rd, they'll see it here back in the church.
Right.
All right. Well, Stephen, I think that is about it. Thank you very much for answering all these questions, and thank you for joining us today. I think everyone really, really loved it.
Good. Well, I had a blast. It's always good to work with you, Cody, and see you. And thank you, Hope, for the question, and Patrick, too. And thanks for everybody for tuning in. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. We will see you next month for our next Red Hill Rediscovered. You can find out our following events on our website, redhill.org/events. All righty. Bye-bye.
Yep. Thank you.